Made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. We are not the United States, we are Canada, and that makes a number of very significant differences, one of which is Americans have always promoted the idea of the melting pot. But here in Canada, we talk about a quilt. We talk about multiculturalism, and we've especially been talking about it since a certain prime minister named Pierre Elliott Trudeau pretty well made it virtually a kind of law. And so many people have gotten behind the idea of multiculturalism. You could argue philosophically that multiculturalism is a braver approach, a more inclusive approach, because the Americans, want everybody to be an American. But the law of unintended consequences has kicked in, and there's some real struggles in this country between people who come here and people who've been here for a while, and that's our focus today. Brad Saltzberg is the BC Director of Putting Canada First. Hello, Brad.
Hello.
Good to see you. So, first of all, you better just describe what Putting Canada First is before we open the doors and let all the people come streaming in, yelling at you, racist, anti-immigration.
Yes. Putting Canada First is a nonprofit organization for Canadians who want to maintain our historical identity, to put it plainly.
Okay.
So,
whatever that may be.
Right.
Yeah.
That's open to discussion and debate.
Yeah.
However, that is our fundamental position.
Yeah.
We're not here to condemn and criticize. We're here to offer an ideology to Canadians, and if they choose to show interest and want to take action based on our particular ideology, they are more than welcome to, and that would apply to any Canadian citizen.
What do you and your friends think is wrong with our current immigration policy?
Immigration specifically?
Yes.
It lacks financial accountability. There's no proven economic benefit in terms of a study being done on the net financial economic benefit of immigration.
Of any immigration?
Of immigration, let's say, for what we're talking about, let's say, within the past 50 years or 30 years. I mean, our organization solicited Chris Alexander, Federal Minister of Immigration, asking him, his office, to produce something or send us something, some report, study, white paper, what have you, and nothing was delivered. And Canada, as you well know, is on the government level, is the land of studies and white papers and
yes, of course,
documentation.
Yeah.
So it's rather curious that nothing concrete exists.
But that's just the government being hopeless. But that doesn't help me in terms of the statement that the net result of immigration is zero or less than zero. Look, what if we had closed the borders 60 years ago? Isn't this a country of immigrants? Haven't we all come here from somewhere else?
Canada's a country built on immigration, that's true.
Yes.
But if we ask the question, is Canada a nation of immigrants?
Yes.
It is not. Because to define what an immigrant means is someone who is born in a country other than Canada and who moves to Canada and becomes a Canadian citizen. If you look at the demographics in our country, you will find that the majority of Canadians were born in Canada. Therefore, we are not currently, even now, and this may change if things continue the way they are, technically a nation of immigrants.
I am a first-generation Canadian. I'm a son.
So am I.
A son and grandson of immigrants. Here's one of the differences that I see, and I think it's regrettable. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, spoke 8 languages fluently.
Yes.
She spoke 1 language at home. She always spoke English on the street.
Right.
What I see that's different today is that people speak many, many languages on the street. And that could be interesting, it could be fun, and it can also be annoying and tiresome.
I think the issue is not so much what language people speak of their own free will and in private and in their own homes.
Yes.
That's actually not what Putting Canada First is concerned with. What we are concerned with is public signage and business signage and the proliferation of non-official language signage. A perfect example would be Richmond, BC, where one could easily argue that a cultural transformation is going on, has gone on, and will continue to go on, that's largely driven by a language issue in terms of the aesthetics of the municipality and therefore public signage.
There's a very interesting dynamic going on here, because when you have spoken up publicly, and I know you have, you've written letters to the editor, you've written blogs and so on, and when you've talked, for instance, about a Crest toothpaste ad in Richmond that was entirely in Chinese script, the current head of S.U.C.C.E.S.S, which is an immigrant settlement society.
I know who they are.
Largely Chinese, mostly Chinese.
Yes.
That lady said, "Oh, I'm sorry, that was an inadvertent mistake, and we should have been more sensitive," and so on. The problem with what she said is that her predecessor, Lillian Toe, who since passed away, once said, "My job is to change the DNA of Vancouver." Now that's kind of a little spooky.
It is a bit spooky, but let's clarify something. The Crest ad was created by Procter and Gamble.
Yeah, I understand.
Nothing to do with S.U.C.C.E.S.S Immigrant Services. That was a different ad for a bus shelter.
Oh yes, for the bus shelter.
And so there's 2 different advertising issues there specific to Richmond. On the bus shelter ad, the issue that we had and concerned residents had was that it's an exclusive ad. It's for Chinese-speaking members of our community only, and this is funded by a heterogeneous tax base. That's one thing that needs to be understood when it comes to S.U.C.C.E.S.S Immigrant Services and a lot of these multicultural organizations who receive taxpayer funding. Now, everyone is paying for this, yet it is clearly an ethnocentric business model that they have. So that, for instance, their client base is 78% Asian and 1.34% European. That speaks to the issue of ethnocentrism. Yet, the taxpayers who are funding the organization are white and black and Asian and everybody. So you see, that is a direct result of official multicultural policy. Okay, so what Putting Canada First would say is, after 25 years, since multiculturalism has been entrenched in our Constitution, it is already archaic, out of date, and needs to be changed.
But you see how complex this is. You've written publicly about an ad at the airport.
Yes.
And people could argue, well, look, people are arriving from China, and so this helps them feel that they're welcome and so on. But here's the irony. When I got back from Italy 2 weeks ago, the last person that I had to check my way through was the kid at YVR taking my landing card.
Yes.
And his name was Tse, T-S-E. He's a handsome young Chinese guy. And I said, hi, it's Tse Shun, which means Mr. Tse.
Right.
So it's a complicated issue. Because people aren't just dropping out of the sky, they're part of our world.
No, it is a complicated issue, but going back to the CREST ad for a minute,
please.
Our difficulty with it, because there was a journalist who attempted to call me out on this, and it's really just a toothpaste ad,
yes.
and it's really not a big deal,
yes.
Really was trivializing the issue, because the real issue is corporate sponsorship of unilingual foreign language signage. Because you understand the world of business, the corporate world. If Crest does it, if Procter & Gamble does it, then Colgate or whomever is also going to do it. And we find ourselves in a situation where not only multicultural organizations are promoting their specific ethnicity through public signage, but that corporations are beginning to do it. This is an unprecedented.
So try this. 6, 7 years ago, I take my dear friend, who at the time was working for S.U.C.C.E.S.S, Mo Ya-min is his name, I take him to the Burnaby driver's license place so he can write his written test for his driver's license. The nice man behind the counter says, "May I see your China driver's license?"
Right.
And Ya-min hands him his wallet, and the guy looks and sees that he's from Guangzhou, a city of 17 million that most Canadians have never, other Canadians, European Canadians have never heard of. And the guy looks at it, he says, "Oh, would you like to write your test in Guangzhouese?" And Ya-min gasped and started laughing. And he said, "No, I'm writing it in English." Why are we offering? Apparently, you can write your driver's test in 170 languages. Why do we do that?
We do it because the original spirit of multiculturalism has been twisted into something it was never meant to be. Multiculturalism, according to the founder of the ideology and also the person who drove this whole thing, his original intention, Pierre Trudeau, was for multiculturalism to function within a bilingual framework. That was his intention. That is one aspect of multiculturalism that is not playing out at all, according to Trudeau's intention.
We're not unique, because
all
over Europe, Europeans are freaking out about what happened to Germany, what happened to London, what happened to Rome, because of the airplane. Migration has changed dramatically.
Absolutely, it has. However, what Putting Canada First is saying, again, is that for Canadians who want to maintain our identity, who value our bicultural identity, who value English and French Canada and the institutions that this country has based upon that foundation, they should have every right to go ahead and do it. And it's not prejudice, and it's not out to damage, right? Because people forget, and younger people especially, that Canada had a whole history before enforced multiculturalism. We have to remember, multiculturalism was never subject to the democratic process. It was unilaterally enforced by our government. So if we're going to have something that is so transformative as multiculturalism and mass immigration are turning out to be, right? That really, arguably the most transformative legislation since the Constitution Act in 1867, at least the Canadian public should have a say in whether we want to take that direction.
Okay, we'll talk in a moment about how you get that say. Our guest is Brad Saltzberg from Putting Canada First. We'll take a little breather, your chance to send your notes to davidberner.com, and also an opportunity for those lovely folks who support this program to say hello here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. We'll be back with you in as many languages as we can muster in a few minutes. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. I suppose one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves and ask our guest, Brad Saltzberg from Putting Canada First, is the question of inclusion versus prohibition. When we talk about some people perhaps being concerned about immigration policies, about unilanguage signage and so on, are we talking about restricting the freedoms and rights of new citizens, or are we talking about bringing people together? And it's not always as easy said than done. Yeah, it's often extremely complicated. One of the things that I don't want, as a Russian Jewish Canadian who's lived his whole life here but comes from immigrant stock, one of the things that I don't welcome, I welcome all kinds of people and have all kinds of friends, but one of the things I'd feel very unhappy about is if I go into some restaurants or some shopping malls and people glare at me like, what am I doing there? You know, because I'm not South Asian, I'm not an Asian. So people stare at me. Hey, if I want to go in the shopping mall, that's my right, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's unfortunate because this comes from this sense of us and them. And I think one of the things that your group is saying, and it's a tricky thing to say without being accused of being horrible people, is that the backfire of multiculturalism is that it's caused this kind of, you know, stress rather than bringing people together.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, again, looking at the original spirit of multiculturalism or the ideology, it is divisive by nature. I mean, it is, if you look at the verbiage of the Multiculturalism Act, I mean, it could be interpreted as simply a license to promote non or foreign culture.
So what do you say to people who would say, look, we have the Dragon Boat festivals, and we have the dragon celebrations, the Gung Fat Choi celebrations, and we have Waisaki, and we have these parades and blah blah blah. And that's wonderful, and it does bring people together, and all kinds of European people who stem from European stock and UK stock celebrate those things along with Asians. What do you say to that? Yeah.
Pay for it yourself. That's what we say. You know,
you realize that we the taxpayer, pay for Catholic and Jewish schools.
True. True.
Yes.
I understand. But, you know, cultural promotions and there's a limit to, you know, how far you should be able to take this. And I'll give you a specific example.
Please.
An organization called Asia Pacific Foundation and their funding and how they utilize it. They have a 50-page document basically for Asian aptitude within Canada. And their recommendation is a comprehensive infiltration, for lack of a better word, of Canadian society with Asian culture. So when I say comprehensive, that means government, education, public school system, business. And their whole movement is toward basically inundating Canada with Asian culture.
Here's another odd dilemma. On the one hand, we have wealthy Mandarin-speaking mainland Chinese who buy houses and don't live in them, and just buy them and sort of keep them up and then head back to Beijing to continue doing business.
Big issue.
But on the other hand, if you looked at the dental school graduates in this week's newspaper,
which I did.
Well, then you notice all the Lees, Wongs, and Laos.
I did notice.
Yeah, so there are lots and lots and lots of people who come from Chinese families who are becoming contributing members of the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're not disputing that.
Yes.
But you have to keep in mind, it's important to realize that.
So you're not saying shut the doors?
No, we're not saying shut the doors. We're saying maintain traditional Canadian culture.
How would you change immigration laws, if at all? How would you change the rules?
It has to be based on proven economic benefit. Until you can show us the money, okay, that the net fiscal impact of immigration is in the black and not in the red.
One of my favorite places in the world is Italy, and Italy, Venice in particular, is very interesting. You cannot stay there for longer than a certain period of time without basically becoming a kind of citizen or a second citizen. Should we be doing that in Canada? Should we be saying, look, it's okay to buy houses in Shaughnessy, but you got to live there for minimum 6 months?
I'm not so sure about those rules in particular. I mean, our organization, again, is focused on, when it comes to housing specifically, affordability.
Well, guess what? The horse is out of the barn.
Yeah. Low income and middle income Canadians and Vancouver residents. What jeopardizes that, we're not in favor of. And what jeopardizes that, frankly, is the whole dynamic of local politics, politicians, real estate developers, many who are ethnic-oriented, let's say, and multicultural organizations. So there is a, what would you call it, a symbiotic relationship among those three groups that drives the real estate industry in Vancouver and turns it effectively into a giant roulette wheel to the exclusion of second and third generation Canadians, middle income Canadians who are being marginalized. And remember, so much of people's equity, building up equity, is such a big part of wealth accumulation in Vancouver that if that entire demographic is excluded, the rich get richer and the middle class become poor.
And we know that that's what's happening.
It is.
Let's look at Andrew Coyne's op-ed piece, or editorial piece rather, in The Sun today. Make temporary work permanent. That's his basic argument.
Yeah. We oppose that.
Why?
Absolutely.
Why? It seems like a reasonable answer.
No, let's understand something about immigration. You have to see this in the context of immigration. Putting Canada first would say that the temporary foreign worker program and the live-in caregiver program, of which 600,000 Filipino ladies have entered the country, are secondary immigrant streams. So when you have 250,000 annual immigrants under the quota, it's really not that. It's really much more, 500,000, 600,000, because these programs are a workaround to bring additional immigrants, largely Asian, to Canada.
Okay, so what if we said you're not coming here for 3 months and being a slave? If you want to come here and work at McDonald's, you're going to become a citizen. Okay,
they are not slaves because they're choosing to come here. There's nothing slave-like about it.
There are often things that are slave-like about it. People are often treated really abysmally, and
putting Canada first puts jobs for Canadians first. Jobs for Canadian citizens first. The well-being of the temporary foreign workers it's important on a human rights level, but it's not our priority.
When I was growing up in the north end of Winnipeg, and the only people in our neighborhood were Ukrainians and Jews, there was a standing running joke, and it was, "Oh, some DP come take my job." Some displaced person.
Right.
This was after the war, okay? It was the Second World War. So now you're basically saying the same thing, So immigrants are going to come and take our jobs. It turns out that most Anglo-Saxon Canadians don't want to be working at McDonald's, and they refuse to park cars, and they refuse to do all kinds of things.
It's a matter of priority. Jobs go to Canadian citizens first, then they go to non-Canadian citizens.
And then what? And then what do we do?
And then what do we do?
Let's say we need more people for more jobs. If we stopped the flood,
we train them. We train Canadian citizens, and the gaps that exist, we fill in with foreign workers. But
yes.
we don't...
And what, with temporary foreign workers?
Yes, temporary foreign workers.
What would be wrong with letting them stay and work?
I don't know that there's anything wrong with it. I just think that Canadians need to wake up to the idea that these programs are, you know, intended. A lot of the intention is to prevent the public from revolting, because if the real figure was 700,000 immigrants per year, taking the live-in caregiver, temporary foreign worker, and the immigration numbers, we may have a revolt on our hands.
Brad, we're out of time. The public is always revolting. Quickly,
yes.
How do you get your message across? Obviously, conversations like this.
Our website, our Facebook page, we lobby media, government, and business. And putting Canada first has achieved an amazing amount in the 2 years that we've been in existence.
Okay, we'll stay in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, folks. That's it for us. Next week, believe it or not, Stop Torture. Our guest will be the local head of Amnesty International. We've never had anybody from Amnesty on, so I'm very excited about that. It'll be very interesting. Thank you for being with us here today on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.